Good evening, dear friends. Here we are, chapter 10. We are in middle of chapter 10. We're going to conclude chapter 10 today. That's the plan. We're halfway through. We are on page 95 in your handouts. You see page 95? What's happening in chapter 10? The Alter Rebbe introduced us to the concept that there is an ongoing battle that is going on within us between the animal soul and the godly soul, right? There's not only a conflict, there's war, there's all-out war. People want to win. People are fighting for survival. And the Alter Rebbe is going to teach us 5 different categories, 5 divisions of what could be your state of your battle, which means within the Jewish people, if you put everybody on a spectrum, how well is your battle doing? How are you managing your battle? What's the state of your battle? Who's winning? Who's losing? What are the strategic advantages that each side has? Right? What's the state of your union? Right? Tomorrow night we got the State of the Union. So what's the state of your you are a union. You're a little city. And there's a war that's being fought over your little city. What's the state of that war? Who's winning, who's losing, etc. So there's 5 different categories, and you fit into any of these 5 categories. There's basically 5 areas on the spectrum of what could be happening within you, within your battle. So chapter 10, chapter 12, and chapter 13 are going to be walking us through these 5 different categories. Chapter 10, we are on one end of the spectrum, which is, we're going to the extreme over here. The battle has been won. That's chapter 10. We're talking about a tzaddik, a righteous person. What makes somebody a righteous person? So that Tanya gives us a definition. You want to know what a tzaddik is? A tzaddik is somebody who internally has, for all intents and purposes, gotten rid of any negativity of their animal soul. Period. There's no more negative and ego-based and pleasure-based and unholy-based and klipa-based desires or wants or instincts or impulses. It's gone. The only force present right now in this body is the godly soul. He thinks godly, he dreams godly, he does godly, everything is godly, period. There's no evil within him. It's not even possible. That's a tzaddik. Now, before we go on, I want to jog your memory because these are important terms to remember. There are 2 types of tzaddiks. Generally speaking, a tzaddik is somebody who has no evil impulses, nothing to worry about there. But there are 2 types of tzaddik. You remember this? There's something called a complete tzaddik, and there's something called an incomplete tzaddik. A complete tzaddik has done the whole job. His animal soul has been stripped of anything what we call negative or bad or ungodly or unholy or of klipa. It's gone. The godly soul is simply over it. The tzaddik is over anything animalistic. And he's really beautiful. He's 100% good and holy, and you will not even find the tiniest little sliver, not even a little last bit of remnant of bad or evil or animalistic in this complete tzaddik's heart and soul. He's just pure and pure through and through. But then there's another level called the incomplete tzaddik. And the incomplete tzaddik is the incomplete tzaddik is a tzaddik who, even though he never actually feels any negativity, any of the negativity of a Yetzer Hara, of the evil inclination, and no negativity of the animal soul, but a little bit of the badness of the evil is left. A little bit of klipa is left there. And that little bit of klipa, on the one hand, is so little that it doesn't even have a standing chance of survival. It doesn't even have a standing chance to try to, launch a counteroffensive. It's a tiny bit. He's totally overwhelmed and outshouted by the good within this tzaddik. But a little bit of the Yetzer Hara, a little bit, a tiny little bit at least, of the negativity, of the klipa, of the animal soul is still present. And in last chapter, the Alter Rebbe gave us a few internal markers that a tzaddik can judge him or herself if they are a complete tzaddik or an incomplete tzaddik. An incomplete tzaddik is not going to be sharing that same passionate love for God and that same passionate disassociation with pleasures of the world. That's kind of what we spoke about, right? There's two types of tzadikim, and this is the basic idea. Before we continue, I want to share with you two Hasidic stories, all right? Two brief little Hasidic stories. One story is from recent Hasidic times, and one is actually from the founding of Hasidic times, all right? So in the 50s and 60s, the Hillel on campus evolved a lot. Today, it's not what it used to be. What it used to be is not like what it is today. So back then, the Hillel on campus, they would bring students, Jewish students, to New York, for like a tour of Jewish organizations and Jewish infrastructure, Jewish life of New York. And one of the typical visits that Hillel students, when they would do these New York trips, would make was to the Rebbe. The Lubavitcher Rebbe would have a meeting, and they would have chances to do a Q&A with this great rabbi. So it's a little bit hard to imagine that Hillel today would be bringing their students to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, but back then that was what Hillel was doing in the 50s and the 60s. And these college students were young and sometimes disrespectful and perhaps very candid. And they would sometimes ask the Rebbe questions that nobody would ever dare ask most people would be too embarrassed to ask such questions, but they were blunt and maybe a little bit inappropriate. So one of them asked the Rebbe, one such story is, a college student asked the Rebbe, how does somebody become a Rebbe? You're a Rebbe, so how can somebody become a Rebbe? So I'll share with you. The first step of being a Rebbe is shedding yourself completely of any sense of ego, any sense of yourself. You cannot have any iota of self-interest or of your presence in the picture. You have to strip yourself totally of your own ego and to devote yourself fully to Jews. That's the first step. So before anything else, I feel like that gives a little bit of an idea of a tzaddik. There's no animal, there's no klipa, there's no ego. Here's another story. We spoke a little bit last week about the idea that the complete tzaddik is one who takes his animal soul and lifts it up to become a force of goodness, of holiness. That the animal soul starts wanting God and starts wanting Torah and starts wanting holiness and mitzvahs. So there was a tzaddik, a very big chassid. His name was Rabbi Hillel of Parich. Right? He was a very big figure in the early years of the Hasidic movement. He once said, if only the world's greatest hedonists, right? What's a hedonist? Somebody who loves pleasure, looking for pleasure, right? Or an Epicurean, right? Is an Epicurean, right? Somebody if only the world's hedonists knew about how great the pleasure of godliness is, they would all be running for godliness. This is the greatest pleasure that exists in the world. Now, I'll be honest. For people like me and you, it's a little bit of a hard statement to understand. Things associated with God, unfortunately, in modern day America, we usually tend to think of them as not very pleasurable, right? Like Hebrew school and Rosh Hashanah services, these are not the very pleasurable moments of our life necessarily. But that's what Rabbi Hillel of Parich said. It's the truth. That's the greatest pleasure. And if even the greatest gluttons and hedonists, if they would know the great pleasure, they would be running after godliness. In any case, all right, that's the introductions. Let's read. We're in the middle of page 95, towards the top of page 95. We now know about these two types of tzaddikim. There's the incomplete tzaddik who is pretty well off, but has a little bit of what we call evil or negativity or bad left. And then we have the complete tzaddik who has, he's unbelievable or she's unbelievable, right? No negativity at all. This is a walking, talking, breathing, godly soul. So let's read. How rare are tzaddikim? Right, you see where we're holding, not page 95? So the Alter Rebbe says, now, this level of the incomplete tzaddik, when it comes to incomplete tzaddikim, it is subdivided into tens of thousands of levels, depending on the precise nature, both qualitatively and quantitatively, of the minuscule evil that remains in him. So the Alter Rebbe is saying, even when we come to the category of incomplete tzaddik, there's a very large variety of what type of incomplete tzaddik you could be. And it all depends on the little bit of evil that's left within you. And the author says there are qualitative options and there's quantitative options. All right, so let's read. Let's start reading. There are qualitative differences, right? There could be differences in quality, which means in the type of evil that remains within him from any of the four negative elements of the animal soul. So we learned earlier that the animal soul has four negative elements that are the source of all evil and unhealthy tendencies and impulses and desires. What are the four negative elements? There's water, fire, air, and earth, right? And all negative character traits, like being arrogant, like being lazy, like depression, like boasting, like frivolous. All these things stem from one of the four negative elements. So the Alter Rebbe says there could be differences between one incomplete tzaddik and another incomplete tzaddik. One incomplete tzaddik has this type of evil. Another incomplete tzaddik has this type of evil. Okay, there's different variations. Or let's continue reading. There's also difference in quantity. How much of that evil is left? It may differ in the extent to which the bad is voided by dilution, such as, for example, dilution by 1 in 60, or a diminution of 1 in 1,000 or 10,000, etc. Which means it's also, the question is, what is the ratio between the little bit of evil and that large amount of good, of holiness? Is it 60-1? That's the minimum. To be an incomplete tzaddik, you have to have minimum 60-1, which means whatever volume of evil you have within, there has to be 60 times that amount of holiness within. That is the baseline of the incomplete tzaddik. But the sky's the limits from there, right? How little could you shrink down? How insignificant could you make that little bit of evil? There could be 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000. And by the way, these are halachic criteria. In Jewish law, there's a question. What happens if a little bit of non-kosher food gets into kosher food? Here's the example. Let's say you are making a massive pot of cholent. You're making a chicken soup. And somehow a little bit of non-kosher food gets in there. It's not kosher. You can't eat it. So what do you do? So Jewish law says, well, what is the ratio? What's the ratio from kosher to non-kosher? If you at least get 60-1, which means that for the volume of non-kosher substance in this pot, you have 60 times that volume of kosher, it becomes diluted, diminished. It's as if it's not there, which means it technically is there. We're not saying it's like, we're not going to make believe as if it's not there. It is there. But from the purpose of halacha, how are you, Mandela? Want to go upstairs? I'm on video. Want to go upstairs to mommy? You want to sit here? So ask mommy, okay? So go upstairs to mommy. Oh, is mommy right here? Oh, okay, so go to mommy. Okay, these guys? Jewish law sometimes says that we need an even bigger diminution, 1 in 1,000, or even 1 in 10,000. So the same thing works on a spiritual basis with the tzaddik. Minimum to be a tzaddik is that whatever evil you still have left within you is diluted, is overpowered by 60 times that amount, and it could go on from there. So there's many different variations of the incomplete tzaddik. Let's continue. The various levels of the incomplete tzaddik account for the many tzadikim found throughout the generations. As the Talmud states, 18,000 tzadikim stand before the Holy One, blessed be He. So when it comes to incomplete tzadikim, that's not, relatively speaking, it's not that much of a rarity. You could find incomplete tzadikim. Don't ask me, it's not like I know any personally, but the point is that relatively speaking, these guys hang around. These men or women who are very holy. But, let's continue reading. But when it comes to the level of the complete tzaddik, it is about them that Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai said, I saw the ones who dwell above, men of ascent, and they are few. Complete tzaddikim, somebody who is absolutely no evil within them, on the highest level tzaddik, that's very rare. Maybe you'll have one in a generation. Generally, you'll have one in each generation. A complete tzaddik is a big deal. Somebody who has no evil at all. Okay. So there we got a little bit more of a description, a little bit more of an understanding of the complete tzaddik and the incomplete tzaddik. Okay. Now the author is going to conclude this chapter by talking to us a little bit more about the spiritual lifestyle of a tzaddik. If you could get to understand the life of a tzaddik a little bit, the Alter Rebbe will tell us two special, unique characteristics of a tzaddik. We could wonder, if we don't expect to be a tzaddik, what's the point of learning about a tzaddik? What's the point? Right? Would you be interested in reading about the life of a Martian? I don't know, maybe, if it's interesting. But, it doesn't have much relevance to us. So I just want to give this as an introduction. Before we continue learning a little bit about the lifestyle of a tzaddik, the reason why the Alter is telling us this is because while we can't live this lifestyle 24/7 by default, like a tzaddik could, but a little bit we could. This lifestyle is unbelievably inspiring, and we should try to emulate it at least a little bit, right? Be a little bit of a tzaddik. And we're going to learn that a little bit later on. The Alter is going to say that even though most people were not born with the power to ever be a tzaddik, we have to all try to be a little bit like a tzaddik, a little bit. And, let's not fool ourselves. We're not going to be getting rid of our animal souls. We're not going to be getting rid of our evil. We're not going to be getting rid of our ego, but a little bit. These are such powerful messages that we need to learn from. So the author is going to teach us two concepts over here, very beautiful concepts as we close this chapter and we close our exploration of this unique breed of Jews, unique breed of humans called the tzaddik. Right, we're on page 96. And the author is going to build this on what we just read. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai, are you familiar with that name? Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, one of the greatest sages who ever lived, the author of the Zohar, the classical book of Kabbalah. He was the sage of the sages, right? He wasn't just a sage. He was a leader, towering figure. And he said about himself, he says, I'm a complete tzaddik, and I see that there are very few. And he uses a very interesting phraseology to refer to complete tzaddikim. He calls them the ones who dwell above, or men of ascent. So let me tell you the Hebrew, because the Hebrew is actually pretty familiar Hebrew. Men of ascent is in Hebrew, that's b'nei aliyah. So b'nei means like people. And aliyah, what does aliyah mean? Like today we use the word aliyah to go to Israel, but it means to go up, right? To go be elevated, ascent. So he calls them men of ascent. Complete tzaddikim are men of ascent. So the Alter Rebbe says, what's the meaning of men of ascent? So literally speaking, you just say men of ascent. They're people on a very high level. But the Alter Rebbe is going to tell us a lot of deep meaning behind the term men of ascent. When we call the complete tzadikim men of ascent, it is reflecting two key characteristics of who these people are. So let's read page 96. Part 3 of the chapter, the elevated spiritual life of the complete tzaddik. Here we go. So the first idea is that it's a life devoted to holy transformation. Okay, yeah, this pen is gone, which is a good sign. All the ink was used up. Right? How often do we get to finish pens? It's a rare celebration, rare achievement. To finish a pen? Okay. I actually can't remember too often that I finished a pen. This is a pretty big deal. Yeah, I can tell there's no more black ink in there. Okay. Let's read. With the above explanation of the level of the complete tzaddik, we can now understand why they are referred to as men of ascent. Why are they called men of ascent? Here's the key idea. Because they transform the bad of their animal soul and elevate it to holiness. Tzadikim take stuff in this world that are bad and cause an ascent. Lift it up, transform it. As with the anecdote mentioned in the preface of the Zohar. Let's read the anecdote. When Rabbi Chia wanted to ascend to the heavenly chamber of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, he heard a voice call out from there saying, until you have transformed darkness into light and bitterness into sweetness, don't come here. Which means, what is a complete tzaddik? Somebody who takes darkness, makes it into light. Bitterness makes it into sweetness. The complete tzaddik who never has to contend with evil, their whole lifestyle is all about what? Taking things that most people look at as negative, taking things that most people say, stay away from it, don't touch it with a 10-foot pole. It's unhealthy, spiritually dangerous, and they cause an ascent. You know, this is a very important message. Tanya's going to be speaking a lot about this. You know, in the Jewish world today, and this was especially on display right after the war, right after World War II, when Jewish life really migrated to America, shifted over to America. And in Europe, the Jews, depending where, but the Jews of Eastern Europe lived lives of isolation from society. They were very poor, very impoverished. And life was so sheltered. There was an enclave of Jewish life. It was, what we call shtetl life. There was the cheder, there was the shul, there was the beis medrash. It was the environment of Judaism. You lived and breathed Yiddishkeit, the warmth of Yiddishkeit. Come to America, and all of a sudden it's the melting pot. And especially right after the war is the years of American affluence. And there was a big question. There's a clash of cultures. The Jewish culture from the old home, from Europe, and we have now the world's culture. And it was, most Jews saw it as a contradiction, as a conflict, as a rift. So some Jews said, listen, this is the new world. We have to assimilate. And I don't mean to, assimilate simply by the word of we can't ignore society. We have to try to enmesh ourselves. And there was a drop of values. And they became Americanized. And they said, the level of piety and religiosity that we had back at home in Russia and in Poland, we can't have that anymore. So we have to, meet the new world. So maybe their children used to go to a cheder in Europe, but over here they go to public school. Right? That's an example. Other Jews did the exact opposite. They built walls. They built their own communities. They built figurative walls and said, we're going to make believe as if the world doesn't exist. Ignore the whole world. Then there's another model, which is we don't ignore the world. We don't get beaten by the world. We don't let the world dictate our lives. We transform the world. Is there some darkness in our lives? Is there some darkness we have to contend with? It's an opportunity. We don't live physical lives to shun it. We don't live physical lives to ignore it. We live physical lives to be people of ascent. Make it holy, make it special. See the opportunity there. We don't break the world. We don't break our bodies. We don't break our animal soul. We elevate them. We transform them. And this is something that the tzadikim have always been such an inspiration for not allowing themselves to be overwhelmed and intimidated by the world, but saw it as a challenge for a chance of transformation. Just a little example, in the 50s and the 60s, all of a sudden, every American home is starting to own a radio and a television. And religious Jews were freaking out. Are we going to allow our radio into our home? And on the one hand, the Rebbe spoke about the idea that the Rebbe spoke to his Hasidim, that homes have to be pure environments. Don't bring junk into your home. Your kids don't need television. I did not grow up with a television. My children do not grow up with a television, and I'm very proud of it. There's nothing good of allowing your kids to sit in front of television screens, right? Certain things in life you can say at least there's some benefit. There's no benefit. Okay, call me biased, call me crazy, but that's what I think. But you know what the Rebbe did say? Radio, television. You know what type of opportunity we have? Let's make Jewish radio programs. And the Rebbe was the first one to embrace modern technology. And in the early 60s, the Rebbe started a Tanya class on the radio in New York City. Every Saturday night after Shabbos, you could log on to your radio. And Chabad was breaking record, breaking technology with international satellite shows of live footage from multiple countries. And the Rebbe's Farbrengens were broadcast live on cable television 5 times a year. The Rebbe saw this as a way, as an opportunity from God to make it holy, transform the opportunity. If there's something in the world, transform it. Use it as an opportunity. We don't break the world. I'll tell you a little story on this concept. We don't break the world. We transform the world. So it's a big paradigm shift. It's a different way of looking at it. So here's a story about the Alter Rebbe, author of the Tanya. So the Alter Rebbe was arrested. He was arrested twice in his life. He was framed on 2 occasions. And the story goes that he was locked away. This was in the year 1796. No, later, 1798, actually. 1798. Okay, 1798. He was being kept, it's still there. If you go to St. Petersburg, there is a jail compound, a prison compound, which is on an island, surrounded by a river. And what they would do is there's government buildings on the outskirts of the river, and in the center of the river, on the island, there's this, and this is where the Alter Rebbe was, in St. Petersburg on this island. And then every single time they wanted to hold interrogations, they would bring a little boat, a little paddle boat, bring the Alter Rebbe from the prison to one of the government office buildings on the other side of the river, right? So at one time, it was the night that the Alter Rebbe needed to bless the new moon, right? There's a Jewish tradition, Jewish ritual, I don't know if you know about it, of blessing the new moon once a month. And the Alter Rebbe needed to do it. And from his jail cell, he wasn't able to bless the new moon. So he was being taken by his captors, and he asked them, please stop the boat so that I could stand up and bless the new moon. And they said, I'm sorry, we don't take orders from prisoners. We're not stopping the boat for you. And the Alter Rebbe performed a miracle, and the boat stopped, and it wouldn't budge. And these officers saw that you don't play around with the Alter Rebbe. So the Alter Rebbe then let the boat go and asked them again, can you please stop the boat? And they said, yes, we'll stop the boat for you. And they stopped paddling and they let the Alter Rebbe stand up and say the blessing. Yeah. If you simply read the story, there's something interesting. The Alter Rebbe was able to perform a miracle and force the boat to stop. But the Alter Rebbe didn't stand up then and say his prayers. The Alter Rebbe then let the boat go again. The miracle stopped. And then he asked them again. Think about it. Why does the Alter Rebbe have to do that? If you could stop the boat on your own, why are you asking them? Why did you even ask them in the first place? Just stop the boat on your own. You could do it. It's a miracle. And the Alter Rebbe himself explained, we don't rake the world. We elevate the world. We want the world itself to support us. We don't force the world. We don't break the world. We don't shatter the world. We uplift the world. Deep story, very deep story. There we have it. Our job is to take, so what's the message for us? That if we find that we have something negative within us, maybe a negative situation that we're dealing with, maybe a negative character trait in our children, a challenge we're going through, or maybe just something in our lives that is stopping us from growing, stopping us from growing in our commitment to Hashem, commitment to Judaism. How could we be people of ascent? How could we take this opportunity and transform it? That's the challenge. And this is something very inspiring. A tzaddik, the complete tzadikim, live in this model 24/7. Everything is the opportunity for transformation. That's what we have to do. But let's continue. There's one more idea of the tzaddik. Very powerful idea. You ready? Which is a life of total selflessness. Middle of page 96. The Alter Rebbe says, there is another reason why the complete tzadikim are called men of ascent. Not only, this is the reason, another reason, not only is their relationship with evil unique, but there's also an elevated quality in the way they serve God by doing good in the fulfilling of Torah and its mitzvahs. So not just in the way they relate to evil and challenges and bitterness and darkness, but even the way they do Torah and mitzvahs is in a whole different league, which is what? Let's read. Their service is devoted exclusively to God at the highest possible level. It is not merely to attach themselves to God, to satisfy a personal thirsting of their souls that thirst for God. As the verse states, all who are thirsty go to water, as explained elsewhere. Very powerful idea. They don't serve God out of self-interest. They don't serve God as a tool for serving the self. What does that mean, to serve God in a self-serving way, motivated by self-interest? Usually when we say that somebody's doing something with self-interest, it usually means like something like very diabolical, or something very nasty, or something very underhanded. Like, oh, you're only being nice to me because you want me to help you out next week because you know that you have a favor to ask. That's like very selfish, right? But there could even be very holy self-interests. You want to know what a holy self-interest is? A Jew is thirsty for spirituality, so he goes to find spirituality. A Jew is thirsty for God, so he goes to find God. Isn't that beautiful? You know what? It's a little bit. Is that not a little bit all about self-interest? Is it not ultimately all about me? I want God, so I'll go find God to help me out. Because I want it. I appreciate it. I need it. I'm thirsty. It's still all about you. It's not that bad. If only we served God like that, right? If only we truly felt the thirst and would go. And the complete tzaddik doesn't serve God that way. Nothing's about me. You know why I'm doing what I'm doing? This is what God needs of me. What do you get out of it? I don't know. I don't care. I never even asked. It's totally for God. Pure altruism, total selflessness. I'm here to serve God. God needs me, and I'm here to do that. All right, let's keep on reading. Top of page 97. Rather, the worship of the complete tzaddik is explained in the Tikkunei Zohar. Who is a pious one? Which the word that the Tikkunei Zohar uses is chassid. Who's a chassid? Who's pious? One who does kindness, chesed, for his creator. And the Hebrew word for creator is kono, your maker. You know what? I know what a chassid is? Somebody who works for God. I don't work for myself. I don't think about what I'm going to get out of this. Which you should know is such a unique Jewish paradigm. Every other religion in the world is built upon the premise of what could this religion do for you? Like everybody wants to get heaven. You know what we could do for you? We could get you out of hell and we'll get you to heaven. If you think about it, it's unbelievably self-serving. The whole religion is all about you getting more pleasure. You'll get a bigger piece of cheesecake out, upstairs. That's the whole thing. It's ridiculous. The whole religion is about me and about what I'm going to get out of it. And Judaism says, no, this religion is not here about you. This is not a self-help program. This is not a benefits program. God has serious needs, and you're the guy who could do it. Will you step up to the plate, right? What did John F. Kennedy say? Ask not what your country could do for you. Ask what could you do for your country. And that's what a complete tzaddik is. And the Alter Rebbe is asking us to do the same. It's not about what could Judaism do for me. Oh, do I like this? Do I want this? Do I care for this? Does it make my life meaningful? Does it make me feel bored? God needs this. God needs you. Do a favor for God. Say, God, I'm here for you. A complete tzaddik lives their life in that attitude. And we have to learn from that. That's a very beautiful mindset of selflessness. Now, what could we be doing for God? Let's keep on reading. Here's a little bit of a Kabbalistic idea. Okay, very interesting. In explaining this teaching, the Tikkunei Zohar notes that the term used here for his creator, which is kono in Hebrew, resembles the word nest, which is kan, which means who is a pious one, who is a chassid, one who does kindness for his nest. What does nest mean? So let's read. This adds a deeper dimension to this teaching. The pious one is one who acts kindly with his nest, which is the Shekhinah, to make a union between the Holy One, blessed be He, and His Shekhinah below. So what could we be doing for God? What we do for God in Kabbalistic language is make a union between God, the Holy One, blessed be He, and His Shekhinah. In plain English, what that means is, what we could do for God is to bring Him down here into this world. This is a world which is naturally apathetic to God, unwelcoming to God, and we could bring God and make Him at home here. And this can be a theme later on in Tanya, but that's really what God needs of us. God needs us to be the ones to welcome Him in and bring Him into this world. And that's what God wants from us. And that's, in Judaism, we really believe that. The big God, the great God, the infinite God, all the words, all-knowing, all-powerful, all-being, that God needs you. Joel is asking, what's the Shekhinah? I didn't explain. The Shekhinah represents the way God is manifest here in this world. And the way God is manifest here in this world is in a very limited way. And if we could create a bond between the way God's essence is, the way God is down here in this world, that God's essence will come down here into this world, That's what God wants from us. So let's keep on reading, then we'll talk a little bit more. This selfless intent is expressed in the Zohar, in the section known as Raya Mehemna, on the parsha of Ki Tetzei. This is what it says in the Zohar. This is how it describes it. Like a child who takes care of his father and mother because he loves them more than he loves his own self, his own breath of life, his spirit, and his soul. He submits his life to death for their sake to rescue them. And this is explained elsewhere. This idea that to live your life devoted to God. I'm not living for myself, I'm living for God. So there's a story. There's a story about the Baal Shem Tov. All right? The Baal Shem Tov says like this. The story goes, the Baal Shem Tov was once met a Jew, a simple Jew came to the Baal Shem Tov he was in dire need. I don't know what, he needed a certain blessing. And he was so stressed and he was crying to the Baal Shem Tov, but the Baal Shem Tov was able to see that this blessing was specifically being held back from this person from on high. For whatever reason, God decided that this Jew is not going to receive this blessing, which I don't know what the blessing was. Maybe it was a health, maybe it was children, maybe it was marrying off a child. I don't know, but whatever the blessing was. But the Baal Shem Tov he loved Jews so much, he couldn't stomach the sight of a Jew suffering. So he gave the Jew the blessing. And there's a rule in Judaism. Hey, Mandela. That's it? Okay. You missed that? Just like a flash. Okay. There's a rule in Judaism, Talmud tells us, that if a tzaddik decrees something, heaven obeys. A tzaddik has the power to overrule any rulings from on high. And this Jew got the blessing. But the Baal Shem Tov got punished. You know what his punishment was? Because the Baal Shem Tov didn't respect the decision from on high, from the heavenly courts, the Baal Shem Tov was stripped of his right to heaven, to the world to come. He was told, you're not going to heaven. That's it. This is the story. And the Baal Shem Tov was initially a little bit shell-shocked. He was a little bit upset, a little bit sad, or maybe more than a little bit. But then the Baal Shem Tov started getting very happy. He says, oh, I'm so happy. You want to know why I'm happy? Because I lost my portion in the world to come? He says, this is why. Because until now, I was never really sure. Am I really serving God really selflessly? Or was it really because I knew I'm getting some heaven in the afterlife? And now that I know that I'm for sure not getting any heaven, now I could serve God properly with no selfish motive. It's a very delicate story. You have to really, it's a lifestyle. It's really a lifestyle. See, here's another story. There's an unbelievable, really unbelievable history, a part of Jewish history which has yet to be properly documented, which is at the turn of the Bolshevik Revolution in the former Soviet Union, which is when Russia and went from a czarist regime to a communist society, right? And part of the liberty of communism was a total crackdown on religion. And Jewish life came to a total halt. Millions and millions and millions of Jews all of a sudden weren't able to go to school. Children weren't able to go be educated. You weren't allowed to go to a Torah class. The women weren't allowed to go to mikveh. So Jewish life came to a standstill. And the previous Rebbe, who was a hero, just a brave lion, unbelievable. He stood up and he said, we're not going down without a fight. And he started a movement, an underground movement of sacrifice, of literally a death movement, a movement that ends in death, of keeping Judaism alive. We will not allow Judaism to die. And he convinced his Hasidim. Today Chabad is very nice and cute. We're all around the world and we do good work, and it's very nice. In Russia, we did the same thing. The only difference was that when you get caught, you get sent to Siberia, and you'll probably die. You'll probably leave a young widow with young children behind. And that's what it meant to be Chabad. That's what it meant. And the Rebbe took his Hasidim, the previous Rebbe, and sent them on missions. I need you to go to this region and create underground schools and go and make an underground mikveh in somebody's basement and don't get caught. And the joint here in America funded the previous Rebbe. And the previous Rebbe, within a few years, in the 1910s and in the 1920s, had over 10,000 children, thousands and thousands of Jewish children in Russia enrolled in underground schools. And the previous Rebbe everything came to a standstill. This was the mission. Mushki's great-grandfather was privileged as a young man to be one of the chief operatives of this underground mission. And he was caught and he was sent to Siberia. And he barely made it out alive. Miracle of miracles that he made it out alive. And we're very proud of the family history, right? There was a chassid. His name was Rabbi Dubov. He was killed by the Nazis. Very special guy. And the previous Rebbe put him to work. And he didn't even have an extra second to sleep. Just by the way, just to describe the situation. You ready for this? Just a few months ago, I was speaking to Mushki's grandfather. May he be gesund and live a long life. Lives right here in Detroit. He's the founder of Chabad here in Michigan. He told me, he says growing up, his father was never home at night. You want to know why? Because the KGB raids always happened at night. His entire childhood, his father was never home in the PM hours, or the early AM hours. You know what type of lifestyle that is? He was a man who was giving up his life, everything for the Jewish people. Unbelievable story. And there's a very sad history of the tens or even hundreds of Hasidim that gave up their life. Just like that, another Jewish child should know the Aleph Beis and should know how to say a blessing and should know how to daven and should know how to say Shema Yisrael. Unbelievable story. So let's get back. Rabbi Dubov. He was the previous Rebbe's secretary, and he became the secretary of this underground movement. And the previous Rebbe, it was an emergency mode. It was a time of war. And he didn't have an extra second to his life. He begged the previous Rebbe, let me study Chassidus just for a half hour every day. He once begged just give me a half hour to learn. Give me a lunch break. I need to study. I feel that I need it for my spiritual health. And the previous Rebbe said, no, we have work to do. You can't study. There's no time to study. He begged just a half hour, please. And the previous Rebbe said, no. He started crying. An adult man, not just an adult man, a leader. The Rabbi Dubov, this chassid, started crying that he felt he needs to learn Chassidus, but he can't. And the previous Rebbe started crying also. He felt the pain of this chassid. And the previous Rebbe said, I know that you need to learn Chassidus. But what's going to happen with the work that God needs us to do? Isn't that what we're learning here? Yeah, I know that you need this. You want to do this, but what's going to happen with the work? So let's bring it down to our lives. In our lives, we sometimes treat Judaism a little bit like a smorgasbord. What do you like? What do you not like? What talks to you? What doesn't talk to you? Am I interested? So this mitzvah I like, so I'll do it. That mitzvah I don't like, so I won't do it. And I'm not in the mood of studying Torah right now, so I'm not going to study Torah. And I'm a little bit overwhelmed, so I'm just, forget it. For the next 6 months, I'm just not coming to any classes. I'm not shaming anybody, by the way. We all do this, right? And I'm not in the mood, and I don't like it, and it's boring. We need to challenge ourselves sometimes. But maybe God needs us. Maybe it's not all about me. Just maybe. maybe a little bit. So the challenge is, maybe if there's something in Judaism that doesn't specifically talk to us, next time don't pass the opportunity. Don't just say, I'm not in the mood. Say, yeah, I'm not in the mood. I'll do it anyways. Or if there's a Torah class and that doesn't talk to you, this topic. No, but it's important for a Jew to study Torah. Maybe God needs you to study Torah. So maybe you should study it anyways. And maybe you'll enjoy it in the end. But even if you don't enjoy it, so what? Since when was Judaism all about you and all about me? Just maybe. It's a little bit of a mindset shift. So these are the two qualities of the spiritual life of a tzaddik, and the author was teaching it to us because these are good attitudes to have. Okay, let us conclude the chapter. The chapter concludes with a parentheses or brackets, which is really very deep. So I'm not going to bother explaining it to you. Maybe on round 2, when we finish the whole Tanya, we'll start again. Maybe then we could understand this properly. We'll have a little bit more background, a little bit more knowledge. But let's at least read it, and we'll leave it at that. Okay, towards the bottom of page 97. These two descriptions of the divine service of the complete tzaddik fit together neatly as one, which means we just give two explanations. What does men of ascent mean? Number one, they cause transformation. They cause ascent to everything physical, to the darkness, to anything bitter. And they also have a very elevated model of Jewish living, like a very ascented model, a very, very ascenty. It's not a word, right? Very ascenty. It's not a word. Okay. Very ascent-esque. It's more. Okay. Which is that utter selflessness. It's not about me. It's all about what God needs of me. So the author says these two really, Kabbalistically, are really two sides of the same coin. And let's read, all right? I'm sure you're all going to find this very, very insightful. Through the act of selecting and purifying the good that is within the klipas noga of the animal soul, the feminine waters rise upward. There you go. You transform something from this world, from klipas noga, feminine waters go upward. Okay, keep on reading. This causes unions above that then bring the masculine waters downward. These energies that come down are the waters of kindness within each one of the 248 positive mitzvahs. For all the mitzvahs are expressions of kindness and masculine water, meaning that there are ways by which God's holiness is drawn from above to below to be invested within the lower realms, as explained elsewhere. Okay. It's sometimes good to know that we don't understand everything. What we just studied, let's keep it as something that is beyond us, at least for now. Maybe one day we'll learn about the feminine waters and the masculine waters, and we'll be able to make heads and tails of what we just read. But for now, let's leave it at that. And with this, dear friends, look at how punctual we are. It's amazing. It's 8:31. With that, we are done chapter 10. Moving on to chapter 11. Good stuff going on. Have a wonderful evening. May God bless you all.
Thank you.
Until next time, Zagazant.